So tonight we are having some sutta discussion. I have for some time asserted that the first stage of Aryahood, stream entry, is attained by listening to the Dhamma. And a lot of people find it very hard to believe because they have been taught by many meditation teachers that Aryahood is only attainable by meditation. Now, I'd like to quote some suttas to make it more plain that stream entry actually is by listening to the Dhamma. But there's one sutta where the Buddha talked about his previous life when he was a Brahmin, and he was very generous. He said that his donations during that lifetime, you could say it was like 84,000 buckets of gold, 84,000 buckets of silver, 84,000 buckets of precious stones, and then the 84,000 pairs of cattle, 84,000 pairs or numbers of pigs, and 84,000 chickens, and all these animals, 84,000 numbers of them, and then cloth and all that, and then the food and the drinks that he gave during that lifetime flowed like the river so much. And then he said, in spite of giving so much, he said his merit was very little. Why? Because he said at that time there was no person with right view to receive the offering. So here what he's trying to say is there was no Arya around to receive the offering. So here you see, all Aryas must have right view. So that's the first thing. So to become an Arya, the first step is to get right view. And also stated in the Majjhima Nikaya, I think Sutta 117, the Buddha said, if you want to practice the Noble Eightfold Path, the first step is to attain right view. And after you attain right view, that will bring you to right thoughts. And right thoughts will bring you to right speech. And right speech will bring you to right actions. And right actions will bring you to right livelihood. And that will bring you to right effort. And that will bring you to right recollection. And that will bring you to right concentration. So these factors of the Noble Eightfold Path, they are given in a definite order. And you have to practice it in that order. So here you see, to enter the Noble Eightfold Path, first you have to get right view. When you get right view, you attain stream entry. And the Buddha says a person who gets right view, he has seen the Dhamma. Now, two other suttas are very important. One is the Majjhima Nikaya, Sutta 43, where the Buddha stated there are two conditions to attain right view. And what are these two conditions? In the Pali Text Society books, it is stated the two conditions are another's utterance, and then the second condition is yoniso manasikara, which you can translate as thorough attention, a proper attention. Now this is another's utterance. Now the latest translation of the Majjhima Nikaya is by Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi. And there he puts the two conditions as one, as the voice of another. And then the second condition is proper attention. So you see, it is the voice of another that gives you right view. This is a very important statement. In other words, you must hear the Dhamma from somebody else. Then only you get right view. You cannot get it by meditating on your own and trying to see Nama-rupa and all these things and believe that you get right view. If that was possible, then the Buddha would not have spoken so many suttas. When a Samasa Buddha appears in the world and speaks these suttas and people listen to them, then they become Aryas. If there's no Samasa Buddha in the world, Aryas don't arise by themselves. They only arise with the coming of a Samasa Buddha. So that's why you see, you can see here from here very clearly that to get right view, you must hear the Dhamma from another person. Then you understand the Dhamma. Then only you enter the stream, in stream entry. Now another sutta which corroborates this is the Sarakani Sutta in the Sangyutta Nikaya. In this sutta, Sakyan by the name of Sarakani, he passed away. And people came to ask the Buddha, where was Sarakani reborn? And then the Buddha said Sarakani has gone for a good rebirth because he has attained stream entry. So when this news went around, many people were angry with the Buddha because Sarakani was a drinker, he used to drink liquor. And probably he didn't drink just a little bit, probably drink a fairly big amount. That's why a lot of people could not believe. They say, why if Sarakani can be a Sotapanna, anybody can be a Sotapanna, he's a drinker. So they thought that he broke the precept, he cannot be Arya. So when this news came back to the Buddha said, why shouldn't Sarakani be Sotapanna? Sarakani has learned the Dhamma and practiced the Dhamma for a long time. And then the Buddha also said, look at these trees. Even these trees, if they can understand my words, what is well spoken, what is not well spoken, even the trees also can become a Sotapanna. You see? And this is a very important point. The Buddha said, if the trees can understand my words, they would become a Sotapanna. If stream entry is by meditation, the Buddha would have said, if these trees know how to meditate, they also could become a Sotapanna, right? But the Buddha did not say that. The Buddha did not say if these trees can meditate. The Buddha said if these trees can understand what is well spoken and what is not well spoken, even they can become Sotapanna. So from here it's very obvious that you become a Sotapanna by listening to the Dhamma and understanding the Dhamma. But of course, not everybody who listens to the Dhamma becomes a Sotapanna for various reasons. I guess one of the main reasons is Sila. If you don't keep good Sila, then you have remorse. Your mind is disturbed. So when you listen to the Dhamma, you cannot concentrate on the Dhamma. When you listen to the Dhamma, it's very important to concentrate on it. That's why the second condition is thorough attention. If you pay thorough attention with all your heart and your mind, try to understand the words in the Dhamma, then you can understand. In the Tigha Nikaya, there was a king by the name of Ajatasattu. He came to see the Buddha for the first time. And then he asked the Buddha some questions, and the Buddha answered him exactly what he asked. And the Buddha did not talk more. After that, he was happy with the Buddha. He left. And then the Buddha told his disciples, he said, see this foolish man, to become a king, he killed his father so that he could become a king. The Buddha said, if he had not killed his father, who was such a good man, tonight if I had spoken some Dhamma to him, he would have attained stream entry. So you see, people like this person, because of doing great evil, so his mind was very disturbed. So that there was no point teaching him the Dhamma. He could not penetrate his mind because his mind was very disturbed. So is it quite clear that attaining Sotapanna is by listening to the Dhamma, not by meditation? That's why the Buddha's disciples are called savakas, hearers or listeners. Of course, meditation is very helpful, especially samatha meditation. When you practice samatha meditation and you attain some concentration, your mind becomes much clearer than a person who has the 5 hindrances covering him. So that when you listen to the Dhamma, when you listen to the words of the Buddha, you can see the implications much better than another person. Like all these suttas that I quoted to you, they have the implications. And not everybody can see those implications unless your mind is clearer. After you attain right view, there are a few things that you need to attain liberation. One is sila. Another one is listening to the Dhamma, Dhamma savana. Another one is discussion of the Dhamma, Dhamma sakhacha. Another one is samatha. Another one is vipassana. Now, listening to the Dhamma has a lot to do with vipassana. Nowadays, when people talk about vipassana, they think we are talking about vipassana meditation. It is not vipassana meditation. A lot of people don't investigate properly because in the early suttas, there is no mention of vipassana meditation. Vipassana meditation was only created about 30, 40 years ago. It started off with Mahasi Sayadaw. Mahasi Sayadaw taught this method of meditation, and because it is not the Buddha's method of meditation, that's why he called it, or people call it, the Mahasi method of meditation. And this Mahasi method of meditation is based on the Visuddhimagga. And we know that the Visuddhimagga was written about 900 years after the Buddha passed away. So, the Visuddhimagga talks about 16 jnanas, which is not mentioned in the suttas. So you have to be very clear. In the suttas, when the Buddha talks about vipassana, the meaning of vipassana is contemplation. This you can get from the Chinese translation. The Chinese translation of samatha and vipassana is Chir Kwan. Chir is stilling the mind. That is meditation. Kwan is contemplation. So, to know the meaning of vipassana, we look at the cases. In the Vinaya books, the Buddha, it is mentioned how the earliest arahants became arahants. Firstly, after the Buddha became enlightened, and also if you study the suttas, you find that, and the Vinaya books, you find that the Buddha tried many ways to attain enlightenment. He could not. He was not successful. Then finally, he thought, what is the way out of samsara? Then he remembered that when he was very young, about 10 years old, he sat under the Bodhi tree and attained the first jhana. And then he thought, is this the way to enlightenment? Then he realized, because his mind is quite clear, having attained jhana, he said, yes, that is the way to enlightenment. And then he remembered why he did not use the way before, although he had attained jhana. Then he realized, because the jhanic bliss is very pleasurable. So the ascetics during the Buddha's time, they thought that by pleasure you cannot get out of samsara. You must suffer only you can get out of samsara. So they tortured themselves by all ascetic practices. So the Buddha also, he thought jhana is so pleasurable, so blissful, it cannot be the way out of samsara. So he did not use jhana. Instead, he went through all the different ascetic practices for 6 years until he nearly died. Because he was so thin, he fell into the stream, so he had no strength to do one push-up to get out of the stream. So then only he realized there's no point in all this ascetic practice. He could have died and wasted all his effort. And then he started thinking, then he remembered this jhana. Then he thought to himself, but this pleasure that comes with jhana is different from worldly pleasure. It's different, altogether different. So he decided to use jhana. So he entered the 4 jhanas. Then because of attaining the 4th jhana, then his psychic power came. He had this divine eye. And he used this divine eye to contemplate the 3 things. The first one, the 3 knowledges. The first one was he saw his past lives. And that is very important because when he looked into his past lives, then he recalled that he was a monk under the previous Buddha Kassapa. And then all the Dhamma that he learned from Buddha Kassapa all came back to him. 4 noble truths and all that. Without the Dhamma, he cannot get out of samsara. Then the second knowledge was he looked at beings passing away and being reborn, passing away and being reborn according to karma vipaka. Then he realized all beings, we take rebirth according to karma vipaka. Then the third knowledge was he used the 4 noble truths that he remembered, that he had learned under the Buddha Kassapa. When he contemplated on the 4 noble truths, then he attained enlightenment. Okay. Now after he attained enlightenment, at first he refused to teach the Dhamma because he looked into the minds of living beings. He found that most of the living beings in the world, we want to follow our greed, hatred and delusion. Whereas the way out of samsara is the opposite, going against the grain, going against all your natural tendencies to enjoy the worldly happiness, enjoyment. So he decided to become a Pacheka Buddha. But after he decided to become a Pacheka Buddha, then the Brahma Sahampati came to plead with him because the Brahma Sahampati, his lifespan is very long. And he had seen previous Buddhas. So he realized this is another Buddha. So he came down and asked our Buddha to teach the Dhamma. He said, it's true, most beings would not listen to you. But there is a small percentage of people in the world, they have the potential to understand the Dhamma. If you don't teach them the Dhamma, they cannot progress. Then the Buddha contemplated again and he found that it's true. There are some beings in his lifetime and also those in the future like us who have the ability to understand the Dhamma. And it's because of for the sake of the few that he decided to teach. Now once he decided to teach, in the Vinaya book, who was the first person he wanted to teach? The first person was his teacher. Why? Because his teacher had attained jhana. The 2 teachers who taught him jhana, these were the 2 persons he wanted to teach first in the world. Because he thought to himself, these persons had attained jhana, very easy for them to understand the Dhamma. But then the Deva came and told him, these 2 had just passed away. Then again he thought, then who? Then he thought of his 5 disciples. Because he had attained jhana, he had also taught his 5 disciples to attain jhana. Must be, right? So when he went to them, at first they did not accept him. Later they decided to listen to him. And then he asked them to sit down. He did not ask them to meditate at all. He said, you sit down, I will teach you the Dhamma. And he started by teaching the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, about the Noble Eightfold Path and all that. Hearing this sutta, the first person to attain stream entry was Kondanya. That's why he's called Anya Kondanya. Anya meaning the one who knows, Kondanya who knows. So after that, for the next few days, he continued preaching to them the sutta, one sutta after another. Until when he preached the Anatta Lakkhana Sutta, all 5 of them attained Arahanthood. So now I ask you, where is that Vipassana? They had already attained Samatha. The other ingredient for liberation is Vipassana. Listening to the Dhamma is Vipassana. Because when you listen to the Dhamma, you contemplate, isn't it? Our mind works very fast, As soon as you listen, you start to digest it already in your mind, and that is contemplation. And once you understand, that is having that insight. So the Vipassana during the Buddha's time is this. Because you find in one sutta, I mentioned in my book Liberation, that there are 5 occasions when a person becomes liberated, when a person attains arahanthood. The first one is listening to the Dhamma. Second is teaching the Dhamma. The third is repeating the Dhamma. The fourth is reflecting on the Dhamma. The last only during meditation, when you contemplate on the Samadhi Nimitta. So you see, so after the 5 disciples became enlightened, then he looked around the Buddha. Then he saw this person called Yassa. Yassa was the son of a very rich man, the richest man in town. And he had 4 wives, and maybe more than 4 wives, I'm not sure. And he was being so rich, every day he was entertained by the slaves who would sing and dance for him. And then maybe he would get drunk and all that. So one night, as usual, they sang and danced for him until he was tired, he fell asleep. And they also were tired, they slept on the floor. In the middle of the night, I think the Buddha made him wake up. And when he woke up, he saw all these slaves with their hair loose and half naked and saliva oozing from the mouth and all that. And then he looked at them, it reminded him of corpses. So he probably was an ascetic in the previous life who had attained jhana and contemplated corpses. So when he saw all these people sleeping there, he thought of dukkha. Then he walked out of the room, didn't want to see. And then the Buddha must have used his psychic power to make him walk to the city gates. And the city gates are normally closed at night to prevent bandits from coming in. They open by themselves. And then he walked out of the city gates and walked straight to the forest where the Buddha was waiting for him. When he came to the Buddha, he was repeating, maybe he was half asleep, he's mumbling, dukkha. And then the Buddha said, Yassa, sit down here, there is no dukkha here. Then he sat down. Then the Buddha taught him the 4 noble truths. The Buddha always gave a graduated discourse to a new person. And this I've tried to repeat in my book called The Message of the Buddha. So, after hearing the 4 noble truths, he attained stream entry. Then he stayed with the Buddha. The next morning, the father came looking for him and also came right to where the Buddha was. The Buddha again taught the father the same graduated discourse, ending with the 4 noble truths. And the father attained stream entry. And Yassa, listening for the second time, became Arahant. So now I ask you again, where is that Vipassana meditation? Listening to the Dhamma. Vipassana. But of course, the necessary condition to become an Arahant is he had already attained the 4 jhanas. Maybe not that lifetime, previous human lifetime. So after that, 54 of his friends, of his close friends, they may have been ascetics together in a previous life. When they heard that Yassa had become a monk, because after he became an Arahant, Arahant doesn't go back to the home anymore. So he became a monk under the Buddha. So his 54 friends wondered to themselves, how come this richest man in town, the son, can become a monk? They thought his teacher must be special. So one by one they went to see him and to see his teacher. And one by one the Buddha taught them the 4 noble truths. One by one they became Arahant. So Yassa and his friends, 55 of them, Arahants, plus the earlier 5 disciples, there were 60 Arahants. When there were 60 Arahant disciples, the Buddha asked them to walk and teach the Dhamma. And 2 of them should not go on the same road. They should walk different roads and spread the Dhamma. And all 60 went to spread the Dhamma. And then the Buddha looked again with his divine eye. And then he saw 1,000 ascetics staying by the banks of the river. And these 1,000 ascetics, they must have practiced jhana for the Buddha to be interested in them. And they must have attained jhana because the leader of this group of 1,000, he always thought that he was an Arahant. And I guess he thought he was an arahant, probably because he had some psychic power. Maybe he had attained the 4 jhanas and attained some psychic power. So the Buddha went to them and stayed there for a few weeks. And during these few weeks, the Buddha slowly showed psychic power to them to impress them that his psychic power was very great. For example, sometimes this ascetic, in the morning, because he was very impressed with the Buddha, he'll come and invite the Buddha for the breakfast. And the Buddha said, okay, you go first, I'll join you. Then when he walked to the dining hall, he saw the Buddha sitting there with a flower in the hand. And then the Buddha told him, Kasapa, I offer you this flower. I've just brought it from Tavatimsa heaven. So the Buddha had flown to heaven, collected the flower and came back. They sat in the dining hall and gave him the flower. Of course, he was impressed. Wow, such great psychic power. I can go to heaven and come back immediately. So, by showing these various types of psychic power, all 1,000 of them were so impressed that they became monk disciples of the Buddha. They shaved their head and became disciples. And after they became monk disciples of the Buddha, then only the Buddha decided to teach them the Dhamma. And the Buddha preached to them the fire discourse, Aditta Pariyaya Sutta. Why the Buddha used the simile of fire? Because these people, these ascetics, they prayed to fire, they worshipped the fire. And then the Buddha started by saying, the world is on fire. How come the world is on fire? The eye is on fire, the ears are on fire, the nose, the tongue, the body, the mind is on fire. What fire? Fire of greed, hatred and delusion. And slowly the Buddha talked about no self and all that. And 1,000 of them, hearing the sutta for the first time, became arahants. Now where is the vipassana meditation? That is vipassana, listening to the Dhamma and contemplating. So you see here, 1,060 arahants, the earliest 1,060 arahants, all attain arahanthood by listening to the Dhamma. So that is vipassana. Nowadays, vipassana meditation, after Mahasi Sayadaw taught, then it has become popular. It has become popular for a very simple reason, because you don't need jhana. They say it is a path of pure vipassana, no necessity for jhana. So of course, because jhana is very difficult to attain, so people like to practice it because they think they can practice that way. But the trouble is nowadays, some vipassana monks, either they speak lies or they are very ignorant. For example, one very famous vipassana teacher, he said that the Buddha's method of meditation is vipassana. And he said that samatha meditation or jhanas is the meditation of external ascetics. So either that must be a pure lie or is totally ignorant. Because in the Majjhima Nikaya, Venerable Ananda was asked, what type of meditation is praised by the Buddha? In other words, what type of meditation is the Buddha's meditation? And Venerable Ananda said the first jhana, the second jhana, the third jhana, the fourth jhana. It's very plain here, very obvious here, that Buddhist meditation is the jhanas. There is no other Buddhist meditation other than the jhanas. If you practice meditation and you don't aim for the jhanas, it has nothing to do with Buddhist meditation. It's external ascetic now, external ascetic meditation. So now people become confused because of such lies or ignorance by some of these monks. Also, in the Samyutta Nikaya, in one sutta, the Buddha told his disciples, he said, monks, if anybody asks, what type of meditation did the Tathagata practice? The Buddha said, you tell them that the Tathagata practiced Anapanasati. The Buddha said, before the Tathagata was enlightened, he practiced Anapanasati. And even after he has become enlightened, he also practices Anapanasati. So here it's very obvious, the Buddha's method is Anapanasati. How can you say it's vipassana meditation? Isn't it? The Buddha mentioned that he contemplated the past. And he said that he contemplated as far as 91 world cycles. And which means he must have taken the whole night. He didn't sleep probably from 6 p.m. until 6 a.m. He kept looking, because one world cycle is extremely long time. And he looked into 91 world cycles and he found that there existed 6 Sammasambuddhas. And out of these 6 Sammasambuddhas, which he named, the first one is Vipassi Buddha, then Sikhi Buddha, then Vesabu Buddha. These 3 are not in this world system, not of this earth. Then after that, another 3 before him, they lived on this earth. Kakusanda Buddha, Kona Gamana Buddha, then Kassapa Buddha. And he also mentioned in the Vinaya books that when Kakusanda Buddha lived on this earth, people's age, average age, was 60,000 years. And then when the second Buddha on this earth, Kona Gamana, came, people's lifespan was 40,000 years. And then the third Buddha, Kassapa Buddha, when he came to this earth, human lifespan was 20,000 years. And now our Gautama Buddha, people's lifespan is not more than 100 years. And then the age goes down and then will go up again. And when people's age is 80,000 years average, Maitreya Buddha will come, Metteyya Buddha, what we call Milekud, will come. This world was created, and after that it will dissolve. Right? I mean, when you say one world system, you mean one sun and the planets and all that. That is one world system. So, when the Buddha mentioned the first 3 Buddhas, they are in another world system. But science tells us as long as there is water, there will be life. So it is also mentioned in the suttas that long time ago, this world was so populated with people that towns were everywhere. So much so that a cockerel could walk from one town to another. So the towns were so near each other that even a cockerel can walk across one town to another. So at that time the population, the world was filled with people. Yet now the world has very much less people. And somebody asked the Buddha why. The Buddha said for a few reasons. That people's greed, hatred and delusion are too much. And one, they start killing each other. Another one is when people's greed, hatred and delusion is too much, then the devas are annoyed. And then when the devas are annoyed, then the rain does not come at the right time. And the crops don't grow, there's famine. People also die. And the reason is when people's greed, hatred and delusion is too much, then the higher devas will release fierce yakas. Fierce devas will come down. Either they eat human beings or they create disease and all these things. People die. Of course, some of these things because there is no evidence. We can't prove it. A lot of things in religion you cannot prove. Again, all religions talk about heaven and hell. How to prove this heaven and hell? You can read the Buddha's mind because they have this psychic power. That is the way they communicate. They don't open their mouths. They communicate with each other mentally. Just like you SMS. So, but then because the Buddha's psychic power is greater, sometimes he can control their mind. And sometimes they want to control his mind, they cannot. No? For example, there was one sutta where the Buddha saw that there were some Brahma devas with wrong view. So if you, usually when the Buddha goes to some being, there must be some reason, not only that they have wrong view, more often it's because they were his teachers before. So he feels that he owes them something out of gratitude. He wants to go and teach them and correct their wrong view. So he went to this Brahma, and this Brahma has great psychic power. And he didn't believe the Buddha because they are so attached to their psychic power. They only respect you if your psychic power is greater than them. If your psychic power is less than them, they have no respect for you. So when the Buddha talked to him and told him his wrong views, at first he didn't accept. And then he wanted to test the Buddha. He said, I will disappear from you. You won't be able to see me. Then the Buddha said, you try to disappear, see whether you can disappear. Then he said, I'm going, but he was still visible to the Buddha. So then he realized the Buddha was controlling him. Although he wanted to vanish, he could not vanish. Then the Buddha said, I will vanish from you. Then he said, go ahead. Then the Buddha vanished. And then he couldn't see the Buddha, but he could hear the Buddha's voice. And then he got a shock. He realized that this human being, normally devas, they are very proud of their psychic power. Human beings are nothing compared to them. He was shocked that this human being has great psychic power. Then only he believed the Buddha. There are 5 types of livelihood that the Buddha said a lay person should not engage in. Trading in 5 things. One is weapons that kill. Another one is drugs or insecticide or herbicides that kill. Another one is breeding animals for slaughter. Another one is buying and selling human beings, slavery. Nowadays it still goes on illegally. Another one is selling liquor. But you are putting liquor into your foodstuff, cooking. Cooking is not a problem usually, because when you cook, that liquor evaporates. For example, if they make a cake for a monk, and they put in some liquor, when you bake the cake, all that liquor evaporates. Or even when you cook, you put some liquor. When you cook, it also evaporates. For a monk, the standard is higher than for lay people. For a monk, it is stated in the Vinaya books that a monk cannot consume any food which has the taste of liquor, which has the smell of liquor. And the third one, I think it says the color of liquor, but color is very hard to see. If there is the smell and taste of liquor, then a monk is not allowed to consume. But for lay people, sometimes if you take some liquor for medicinal purpose, may be allowable. The precept against liquor is that you take it to a stage where you lose control. Of course, you have to be careful. Sometimes people like to take liquor and they use an excuse. Even some monks, sometimes they like to use an excuse for health's sake. People who keep ornamental fish or breed ornamental fish to sell, I think it's quite alright, because you're not doing any harm. You're not hurting the animal.